Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 to 9, talk more about those problems you're encountering with airlines and you're not getting your refunds, you're being offered vouchers. In some cases, you're not even able to apply those vouchers. Andy, you'll be the next call on that. But let's turn to other matters and actually have a look at the world of sport. And if you are a football fan, well, it's coming very much to the business end of the season, isn't it? I think, in fact, there were a series of promotions on the weekend, so congratulations if you follow those teams. Sadly, there were some relegations as well, so commiserations if you follow one of those teams and look to a better start in the new football year. But more generally, football fans, says the government, need a bigger, even better say in the running of their clubs, and there are reforms on the way. Conservative MP and Technology and Digital Economy Minister Chris Philp joins me now. Can you spell out what those reforms are, Minister? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Yeah, so we commissioned a fan-led review about a year ago. It was led by Tracy Crouch, a former sport minister, and she listened to fans up and down the country. We're responding to that review today, essentially agreeing with the 10 strategic recommendations that she made. One of the most important.
How long will it take you to rattle through? Can you do all 10, or do you rather pick out the 3 or 4?
I don't think I can. Let me pick out the couple that are the most important. So, probably the most important is establishing a statutory regulator, so a regulator set up in law to make sure that football clubs are well run financially, to make sure they're not going to go bankrupt, to make sure that the people who run them have the right integrity, have the right financial resources and so on. And we say that, we're doing that, because a number of clubs have gone bankrupt, like Bury and Macclesfield being 2 examples. Derby has very well documented problems at the moment.
Nearly lost Wigan as well, didn't we?
Yeah, indeed. And because clubs are such a central part of their community, they are different to ordinary businesses. It's devastating for local communities when their football club disappears. And as a lifelong Crystal Palace fan, I went to my first game in 1991. I completely understand why football clubs are so important, and this regulator will just make sure that the people running clubs don't take excessive financial risk as they do so, to make sure we don't see repeats of the Bury and the Macclesfield and the Derby situations.
Well, let's go to Selhurst Park, the home of Crystal Palace, and I'm sure the owners, I don't know who they are, but I'm sure they're absolutely tremendous, reprehensible bunch of businessmen or women or whatever. But let's just suppose, God forbid, that they put it up for sale and someone perhaps not the perfect track record comes along. How would this monitor, this regulator, how would they exert their power? What would happen, Minister?
Yeah, the current Crystal Palace owners are fantastic, by the way.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah, so the regulator would, so first of all, make sure that football clubs are running themselves financially in a responsible way. They've got enough reserves. They're not spending recklessly on transfer fees and so on, just to make sure they're not running themselves into the ground or taking undue financial risk, which most Premier League clubs, by the way, are not, because they're very well funded. They get lots of money from broadcast rights. But in other parts of the league, for example, the Championship, then quite a few clubs are in a financially somewhat precarious position, which then ends up leading to bankruptcy. But this regulator will also have power to look at people who are thinking of taking over a club or acting as a director to make sure.
Could they block it, though? Could they block it, Minister?
Yeah, yes, they could. They could, on grounds of, for example, integrity, on grounds of adverse past conduct, if they didn't have the financial resources required to responsibly run a football club, on those kind of grounds. So at the moment, that's an expanded list of criteria compared to the one that's in force at the moment, and it would also in the future be done by this statutory regulator, independent, rather than by the football authorities themselves.
And I read it's not just ownership. You're also concerned, I find it incredible that anybody would want to change their name, but there we are. Names, logos and stadiums. How would that work, Minister?
Well, again, my colleague Nigel Huddleston, the Sports Minister, will set all this out in Parliament later on today in more detail, and there'll be a white paper with even more detail over the summer. But essentially, for things that are really our community assets, the name of the club, the badge, the stadium, then we do want fans to have more of a say over any change to those kind of things, because they're integral often to the identity of a particular community. So we just want fans to have a greater voice, particularly in those sort of areas, because they're so important. If ever you were going to change the name or the ground of a club, that obviously does really affect fans in quite a profound way.
But of course it does happen with a major sponsor. I happen to follow Leicester City. We all accept that it is the King Power Stadium, because without the King Power there probably wouldn't be a club, Minister.
Yeah, well, I think naming the stadium is one thing. Obviously, moving a stadium is another. So, and I think probably as a Leicester fan, you're probably quite happy with the King Power connection.
More
right? It's obviously brought great success to the club.
No, absolutely right. Right, I have the benefit of you on the line. Look, can we look at some other matters? The undercover documentary by Channel 4's Dispatches team uncovering rampant sexual abuse, racist abuse in the virtual reality world of the metaverse. One user hurling racial slurs while another was heard to say that he liked to engage in various sexual acts with underage girls. How is this to be policed, Minister?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. And the online safety bill was got its second reading in Parliament last week. I think it was Tuesday of last week. Nadine Dorries and I took it through Parliament, and the second reading passed without a vote. It was unanimously agreed by all sides. The online safety bill is designed to address exactly the problem that you've just identified, which is behaviour happening online, whether it's the metaverse or on other platforms, that is completely in fact would be illegal if it happened in the real world. And the bill has provisions in it which make clear that if activity happens online, whether on the metaverse or elsewhere, that is illegal in law, then these big social media firms, and in fact all social media firms, have to stop that from happening. So that is a huge step forward in the legislation. That'll be policed by Ofcom, acting as regulator. And if a company like Meta, who obviously own the metaverse and own Facebook and Instagram, did not comply with those obligations and with Ofcom's rulings, they could be landed with a fine amounting to 10% of their global revenue, which generally speaking is about 100% of their annual UK revenue. And ultimately, if they didn't comply, there are denial of service powers where you basically chop off their connection to the UK internet. So there are powers in that bill now going through Parliament that will fix this really serious issue that you've just highlighted.
Might it be worth having a word with Nick Clegg, who of course is the President for Global Affairs at Meta?
Yes, he is indeed the President of Global Affairs at Meta. He's a somewhat elusive character. But yeah, I think you're raising an important, serious point, which is
you've tried to contact him, Cleggy, have you? And he's not responded to your calls. Is this what I'm hearing, Minister?
I don't think I have tried to contact him. I talk to Facebook and Meta's representatives in Europe on a regular basis, and I think the Secretary of State has spoken to him. But the serious point is that actually social media firms can act now. They don't need to wait for this bill to go through Parliament, which will take another sort of circa nine months or so. Social media firms can and should act now to stop this happening, and that would definitely include the metaverse. They should act now, not wait.
Lastly, I have to get a final word from you. This row that's been going on, the Prime Minister, by the way, quick to contact Angela Rayner. If some of your Conservative colleagues have been briefing out this story, what would you say to them?
Well, I'd say that their conduct, if they're briefing that, is disgraceful. The comments about Angela Rayner were quite clearly misogynist and offensive and disgraceful. I've never heard anyone say those things, but if I did, I'd certainly call it out straight away. It's disgraceful. No one in public life should receive that sort of misogynistic, offensive abuse. It's got no place in civilised political discourse.
Conservative MP, Technology and Digital Economy Minister Chris Philp, thank you for appearing here on LBC, where the time is 2 minutes before 9. Let's get one more call in on the airline issues or problems. Andy in Sevenoaks. What do you want to tell me, Andy? Good morning.
Yeah, morning, Nick. So we had similar issues to the gentleman that called earlier.
Yes.
Start of lockdown, we were booked to go to Portugal with friends. 4-day break, about £1,200. Lockdown came, the travel wasn't possible.
Right.
We were persuaded by the company to leave